Hello from Cincinnati. This is Eva Floyd, and I'm making this video, a quick video about the essential elements of the Kodaly methodology and philosophy. And fair warning, it's probably going to be one of the most difficult tasks of my life to try to talk so quickly about something that's so important to me. So I am a Kodaly student, and you can see here in my office I keep a poster of Kodaly to overlook my desk because I feel that I try to keep this philosophy in mind in all the work that I do. Also, there's Bartok up there in the corner. He's overlooking, because I know he's very musically particular about everything. I studied 2 years in Hungary, this concept and this philosophy, along with getting my teacher training at Capital University. So this is who we're talking about today, Zoltán Kodály, known as a Hungarian music educator, composer, and ethnomusicologist. So if you're interested in learning more about the Kodaly philosophy and methodology, I suggest you check out OAK, the Organization of American Kodaly Educators. And these main points here are taken right from their website, so you can see it there. So the Kodaly approach to music education is basically an Hungarian way of teaching music based on the ideas of Zoltán Kodály. So if you're familiar with Central Europe, Hungary is right there in the middle of it all. It used to be a much bigger country before the First World War. It lost 2/3 of its space to surrounding areas. And one of the ideas that makes this approach so unique is that it's a national curriculum. So all of the schools, all of the teachers in Hungary have grown up with this way of thinking, and it's strongly unified. So that's really what makes it very powerful, and it's very successful in Hungary because of that. Okay, here is a picture of the Kodaly Institute where I studied in Hungary, and I want you to hear a little bit of what the Hungarian children sound like in their singing. So here's a clip of probably middle school and high school aged girls. I'm going to skip ahead so you can hear the end. And usually when I play this clip, and if I have more time, the students, I ask them what they notice. Of course, it's in a different language, and that's not important. But most of the time, people comment on how the intonation is so bright and brilliant. And really, that's one of the main takeaways of the effects of this particular methodology, is that the intonation is usually so stunning, it's just hard to describe. And this applies not only for choral ensembles, but also instrumental ensembles, because they all come to it from a cappella singing, which is one of the things I'll talk about here. Okay, so from my years of living in Hungary and through my Kodaly work, here's how I summarize. And it's oversimplistic, but here are the two big takeaways for me, is that the teaching, no matter what age level, is musical. And I know that sounds so like, well, duh, you're teaching music, but it's a musical way of teaching. So no matter, even if you're teaching first grade and you're using simple songs, it's musically satisfying for the teacher and the student. And through this teaching, you're constantly, as the teacher, monitoring and developing the student's inner hearing, or another term, audiation skill, and you relate that to everything that you're doing in music, whether it be performing or listening or reading or writing music. And the Kodaly philosophy is, very committed to music literacy. So the reading and writing, of course, is very important, but it all relates to what's going on internally inside the students' minds. And that's very, as you know, very hard to do as a teacher, to know what's going on inside their minds. But that's our job, to commit to monitor that and to develop that. This happens through singing. So the Kodaly approach is a singing-based approach. Even in instrumental music, the singing comes first. Like I already mentioned, we are developing the internal aural awareness, and oftentimes if you go to like just a one-day workshop or something about Kodaly, you might come away with this, oh well, Kodaly is all about a PPP process. Well, that's part of how Americans have explained what happens when in Hungary, which is basically you prepare orally the concept, and that could take one lesson, or it could take weeks, or it could take months. And then once you, through rote and fun, and then once it's really known well to the students, then you present it to them and you actually name it, or you call it by name, and you say, okay, well, this is the interval, or this is the rhythm that you've been doing, and here is the technical term for it. Here's the what it looks like and what it sounds like together, and now you're responsible for that. Every time you see this now, it's your job to name it, to sing it, to perform it. And then you give them many opportunities to practice that through other new context, or through review. So it just happens over and over again. While you're preparing something, you could be presenting something. While you're presenting something, you're also in your lesson preparing something new. So this is just constantly happening in Kodaly teachers' lessons, and they're quite good at keeping it all in balance and checking, knowing exactly where they are. So once you present a concept to a student, then your job is to make sure that it has been prepared there orally, and that it will then be solidified through the practice. So the folk aspect of Hungarian culture is very important, and this is just a shot of me in Hungary. I went outside the institute one day, and yes, there's a folk festival in the town square, and the elementary materials are based on folk music in Hungary, and then it just evolves from there. Kodaly was very interested in this because he was a professor at the Liszt Academy in Budapest, and he was not satisfied with the oral ability of his composition students. So he went to England to conduct one of his pieces, and he saw the English choral school, the tradition of the Glover and Kerwin, and he wanted to begin like a revolution of music education in Hungary. And he knew to do that, he had to start with the smallest of children. But before he could do that, he had to start with the teachers. So he trained them in the Budapest Liszt Academy to go out into the schools and to start at the very beginning, and then it eventually grew up. In 1964, there was an International Society of Music Education conference in Budapest, and of course, Kodaly started this back in the 40s, so by the 60s, I mean, it had really taken off, and they'd had a couple of generations of children performing this work at very high levels now, going all the way up through high school. And the people that came to the conference were so amazed by this that they were like, how is this happening? Tell us more. We want to learn more. So then in the 70s, they opened up the Kodaly Institute in Hungary for teacher training, for teachers to go all over the world to get training there. And then, of course, it began to spread to other countries. So singing is the most essential element of this approach. Singing is always the foundation. So singing precedes instrument playing. Instrument playing is fantastic. Kodaly teachers are not opposed to that in their elementary classrooms, but they believe that that will enhance the singing that happens. So as much a cappella singing as possible, then enhanced through instrumental music. This is why and how the intonation is so stellar in Hungary, is because the singing is the prerequisite, and they believe it goes into the inner ear in the most efficient way before anything else. Before children are allowed to take instrumental lessons in Hungary, they have to do singing through their solfege classes first. So it's a prerequisite, and then it continues on as they study their instrument. And I'll just read this quote to you here. If we ourselves sing often, this provides a deep experience of happiness in music. Through our own musical activities, we learn to know the pulsation, rhythm, and shape of the melody. The enjoyment given encourages the study of instruments, as well as the listening to other pieces of music. Okay, so tools. Most people immediately just think of, oh, Kodaly, so me, and ta, ti, ta. Okay, those are just tools to help students develop these skills. So of course, solfege is one tool. Kodaly did not invent solfege. It came from Guido, who was teaching chant at the time, and it was originally a movable system here. It was only 6 pitches in this chant. Utquantlaxis that was moved around depending upon where they were in the music. They would move it around to fit other chants. And a tenet of the Kodaly philosophy is also to use a law-based minor. If you're not familiar with law minor, as a college musician, it might make you go, what's going on here? Because do is always do, if you come from that in theory. But I learned that, wow, it can make things so much easier actually. And if you present this to new musicians, it doesn't matter to them. They don't have this like preconceived concept, and so it can be super easy. So here's a quick little basis of this. You look at the key signature. F would be do. Yes, F is still do, but la is your home base, so it would be like, you know, la ti do, and you hear where the half step is. It's between ti and do. You don't have to do any alterations. You hear the character of minor. La ti do ti la, la ti do ti la, and then mi is the dominant. Mi la, mi re do ti la, la ti do re mi mi. Mi re do ti la, la ti do ti la la. And you can teach things like this to developing musicians to get the character of minor, and you don't have to explain, well, mi becomes me, or you know, anything like that. You just, this is what minor sounds like, and you already know this because you already know that there's a half step between ti and do. So la is now your home base, and you just go with it, and it can be quite easy. So here are the hand signs coming from the English choral system, Kerwin and Glover. And then the Kodaly uses, the traditional, the Kodaly syllables come from Chevet, the French musician. But, you know, I don't think that the Kodaly music teachers are completely tied to this particular system. I know Takadimi is often used in Kodaly classrooms. It's just, the idea is to use a rhythm system to help your students remember the relationships of sounds to each other in relation to a pulse. So whatever system you use to make that happen, if it's used consistently, it will produce results. So here's a picture of a Hungarian classroom. Here are my classmates. We are watching this lesson, and you can see that it's really an old school in terms of, there are no smart boards, there are no whiteboards actually, it's chalk. And the schools don't have money for this advanced technology, but believe me, in these old schools with chalk, I saw the best teaching and learning happening. So it really comes down to the content and to the teachers, to what you can do. You're not limited by your classroom. And all of these lessons happened where the teacher would travel from the room, so there weren't particular music rooms, but it was still exquisite, high-level music teaching. So this comes to the end of the basic foundational principles there. Really, I believe that when you teach in this way, you try to make this as accessible as possible to all of your students. So here's a quote that really inspires me from Kodaly there. And in an ensemble setting, I purposefully program with my singers balanced things that, you know, that they can learn immediately, and things that I'm going to spend some time teaching. So I work with high school singers who come to the University of Cincinnati for the for a choir that meets here once a week through our prep department. And they come to me with all different backgrounds. So I help on one of my pieces per cycle to make sure they can understand it, and I decide this is the piece that I'm going to teach carefully, and I'm going to teach solo skills through it. I always prepare an info sheet for that particular piece, explaining, you know, we're in this key, so that means these are our syllables, any alterations. Maybe the piece might change keys, and I could say, on this page, you're in this key, these are the alterations. And then I might say, for next rehearsal, I might show them how to do this, and for next rehearsal, we're going to learn this section. And if you can read the solfege, if you have experience, then fine, I want you to do that. But if you can't, then you can write in some key pitches to help you along so that you won't be lost in the rehearsal, or things like that. Here are some textbooks that I recommend if you are in the elementary classroom or thinking about the teaching in the elementary classroom. This is a fantastic text for that. And even if you're not, it just really gives you good overall information about the Kodaly approach. This is a fantastic book for elementary teaching because it gives you lesson plans for that PPP process, which I briefly explained earlier. And for like I said, instrumental teaching or ensembles, instead of using like folk songs, then I use canons and rounds kind of as my go-to material to try to teach a common vocabulary. And I'll use these for literacy lessons, for ear training. I'll use them for warm-ups. I will use them for dictations. I'll use them for all kinds of things. And if you are teaching instrumentally, then of course you can use these for your various instruments with your, you know what I'm trying to say here. I'm losing my words towards the end of my video. As you transpose to all the different keys, that you can do that. Okay, I'm at 15 minutes. I know I'm over time, but this is all I've got for this quick information system about Zoltan Kodaly. I hope you've enjoyed it, learned a few things, and I wish you a great semester. Thanks. Bye.